Remaking Middle School is launching a middle school listening tour. We want to know what comes to mind when you hear middle school. What do you think is and isn't working for middle school students today? What is the future of middle level education? If you are any of the following, a parent, a teacher, administrator, youth development professional, policymaker, or youth advocate of middle grade students, we would love to hear from you. There are two ways in which you can lend your voice to this project. You can complete an online survey. The survey will take about 10 minutes to complete. Or you can chat with a member of the Remaking Middle School team. Interviews take about 30 to 45 minutes of your time and can be done by phone or Zoom. If you're interested in sharing your perspective on middle school education, please visit remakingmiddleschool.org and click Sign Up for the listening tour. Hi, this is Jason Cascarino. Thanks for listening to the Lessons in Adolescence podcast, a production of the Remaking Middle School Initiative, whose founding partners include Youth-Nex, the University of Virginia's Center to Promote Effective Youth Development, and the Association for Middle Level Education, or AMLE. You can learn about Remaking Middle School on the web at remakingmiddleschool.org. Now, here's this episode. Hello and welcome to the Lessons in Adolescence podcast, where we explore the many facets that impact young adolescents in the middle school years, from the adverse to the awkward to the awesome. I'm your host, Jason Cascarino. Today, I talk with three authors of Career Exploration in the Middle Grades, a playbook for educators, which was developed in partnership between the Association for Middle Level Education, or AMLE, and American Student Assistance, or ASA. Stephanie Simpson is CEO of Columbus, Ohio-based AMLE, which represents tens of thousands of middle-level educators across the country and offers a variety of resources, training, and convenings for the field. Ashley Hemmy is Manager of Program Engagement at Boston-based ASA, a 60-year-old national nonprofit and student loan guarantor organization, which has expanded its mission to develop and invest in resources and tools to help students as early as middle school to explore their long-term career and educational goals. And Julie DiPilato is a 7th grade science teacher in Barnstable, Massachusetts, where she developed an array of career exploration programming in her school. As organizational, program, and teacher leaders, these three women showcase how well career exploration fits the developmental needs of young adolescents, which, as Ashley explains, has benefits for youth beyond learning about options for their futures.
Middle grades is kind of a weird time for kids. They're really kind of learning about their own identities. Everybody remembers themselves in middle school, and it was an awkward time, right? So for middle schoolers, that confidence, level of confidence can tend to drop, and some of their decision-making or ideas about whether they're great at specific subjects kind of really imprints in their brains at that time. And so career exploration really allows to give kind of real-world connections to that age-old question of why am I learning about this? And not only that, has been shown to improve student confidence, improve academic success, and also support those decision-making skills.
In part one of our conversation, Stephanie, Ashley, Julie, and I talk about the Career Exploration Playbook, how it came about, why career exploration is a perfect match for young adolescents, and where it fits within schools. In part two, we paint a picture of what career exploration looks like in the middle grades, how educators can use it to enhance their teaching, the ways AMLE and ASA are promoting the larger scale adoption of this practice, and the opportunities for career exploration in the field of education long term. That's in just a little bit. Now, here's part one of my interview with Stephanie Simpson, Ashley Hemmy, and Julie DiPilato. Stephanie, Julie, Ashley, welcome. It's a delight to have you here and to talk about career exploration in the middle grades.
Thanks for having us.
Delighted to be here.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, I'm really eager for this conversation personally. I've spent a good portion of my own career talking about this topic and working on this exact topic. So I'm delighted to have the opportunity to lift it up in this conversation. Let's learn a bit about you all to get started here. Stephanie, why don't we start with you? You've been the CEO of the Association for Middle Level Education, or AMLE, for more than 2.5 years now. And before that, you worked most or all of your career with comparable associations in the health and medical fields. How have you found the transition into the world of education? What's the same or different or more or less interesting or challenging?
It was wonderful to work with physicians, and they do wonderful things, obviously, for their patients. But teachers are just a really special group of individuals. They are just so passionate about their students, and the way that I have seen them go above and beyond for their students, especially over the past 2 years, has just been, pretty indescribable. So I think I get a lot of validation just getting to work for teachers and to be able to support them, and especially when it comes to young adolescents. So we know how special that age group is and that developmental time. So it just really feels like, we're able to make a difference.
Julie, you are a middle school math and science teacher in Barnstable, Massachusetts. There are a lot of teachers out there who sort of fell into teaching in the middle grades, having pursued an elementary or a secondary certification, and, middle grades straddle that line differently in different states, as we know. But it sounds like you may have had a strong and specific interest in middle level education from the start. Tell us how you landed into education and why middle school.
Sure. I took a really roundabout way to get to education. I actually graduated from Bentley University with a degree in economics, worked in a financial institution in software companies, and started volunteering at my kids' school when they were younger. And I'd always wanted to be a teacher, but I wasn't great in school. So I didn't know if that was the right path for me. And I was steered kind of to the business end of it from my family. So I didn't come into education until about 15 years ago. And there's just something about middle school students. They're starting to kind of form their identity. They're getting to know who they are, what they want to do. And oftentimes they're forming that social identity, but they're not forming an academic identity. And that's kind of what drew me to the middle school level.
And Ashley, you are manager of program engagement at American Student Assistance, or ASA, working with the nonprofits and the schools that ASA invests in. Before that, you were a teacher yourself for a number of years, and it looked to me that you actually started out your career in journalism, but made an early shift to education. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so that's completely right. I'm a former educator, former classroom teacher. I taught fifth grade for 7 years before entering the nonprofit space. And I never thought I wanted to be a teacher throughout school. I bounced back and forth through different ideas of careers. For a while, I wanted to be a psychologist, and then I wanted to be a paleontologist, and then I wanted to be a dolphin trainer. I just had all of these big ideas, and that led to some confusion about where I wanted to go to college. I, for the longest time, really wanted to be a writer. That was pretty prevalent across all of my school years, and so journalism seems like an ideal major at that point in time. But then my senior year, the last semester of my senior year, after doing a variety of internships and everything else, I had this crisis of I'm about to graduate and I don't want to be a journalist anymore. I realized at that point in time that writing objectively was really difficult, and I wanted to be involved in a lot of the issues I cared about. And for me, that involved literacy. So I became a reading teacher. I applied to Teach for America on a whim. And so my education story is pretty lucky in that way, but that uncertainty and confusion that I felt is pretty prevalent still for Gen Z and for students today. So as I was a teacher, I noticed that there weren't many opportunities for my students to learn about real world issues and about careers that are available to them. So ASA seems like a great next step to providing additional future planning support for even more students.
And this is a very interesting partnership, AMLE and ASA. Ashley, can you say a little about why ASA chose career exploration in middle school specifically, which I think probably set up the opportunity, at least in concept, to partner with AMLE? And Stephanie, maybe you can say a few words about how this partnership came about.
Yeah, absolutely. So ASA did a considerable amount of research on where to really focus career exploration. And there's a considerable amount of research on middle school as being the best time for career exploration. A lot of that is available in the AMLE ASA Digital Resource Center. Through this research, we learned that engagement sharply declines for middle school students, and that middle school students are actually most receptive to a career development intervention. Career exploration has also been shown to increase student confidence, academic success, and decision making. ASA also did a whole lot of surveys out to middle schoolers and college students. And many college students wish they learned about options earlier in their education career. And majority of middle school students we asked feel a lot of stress when it comes to careers and about learning about careers. So thinking about a 6th, 7th grader feeling that stress, that's a lot. And they're really interested in learning about how their own interests and skills really align to careers. So we decided to test this further. And this was through a middle school grant career exploration program. And that's how we were connected with Barnstable Intermediate School. We funded grants of $100,000 over the course of 3 years to 14 Massachusetts-based school districts to build or expand their own career exploration programs. And then we evaluated the impact of those programs. So we're hearing about and we're seeing the research about why middle school, but then we really wanted to test out what that looks like in a school building. And then so AMLE seems like really a no-brainer for the next kind of connection there because they have built such a strong community of educators. And the building this playbook seems like a really amazing way to get these resources into the hands of educators.
And I would add that it was just perfect timing from our perspective because we had just come out with the 5th edition of our foundational best practice text that we've been publishing for about 40 years, The Successful Middle School This We Believe. Exploration is just woven throughout it because we know that that's middle grade's best practice. So we know that students best learn skills and concepts in context as they become these kind of explorers and thinkers and communicators as they're developing those 21st century skills. So when ASA, they had participated in our conference, but we sat down and just said like, hey, what could it look like if we married your expertise on career exploration and what that best looks like in schools and ours on the middle level concept and the structures that are already in place that could easily weave these in, like advisory and teaming and some of these other concepts exploratory that schools were already doing. And so when we sat down and kind of looked at what we both had in our respective expertises, it just went together so perfectly. So it's been a really nice opportunity to show schools how career exploration naturally integrates into the middle level concept.
Well, let's get into the specifics of career exploration in the middle grades. AMLE and ASA partnered to develop this publication that we're going to talk about called Career Exploration in the Middle Grades, a playbook for educators, which anyone can download at amle.org. And Julie, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about like what this looks like in practice, but I thought we might kind of set it up a little bit more conceptually at the top here. I spent a lot of my work with organizations like Citizen Schools and Spark trying to convince people that early adolescence was the exact right time to engage youth in career exploration. And you all address this in the playbook. Just take us through, if you will, some of the key features of early adolescent development that coincide most closely with career exploration.
As I mentioned before, for middle school students, that engagement really sharply declines when they enter the middle grades. They move from having one primary teacher to then being in this space where they're taking these variety of classes. There's a new level of responsibility that takes place in the middle grades. And middle grades is kind of a weird time for kids. Like, they're really kind of learning about their own identities. Everybody remembers themselves in middle school, and it was an awkward time, right? So for middle schoolers, that confidence, like level of confidence, can tend to drop, and some of their decision making or ideas about whether they're great at specific subjects kind of really imprints in their brains at that time. And so career exploration really allows to give kind of real world connections to that age old question of like, why am I learning about this? And not only that has been shown to improve student confidence, improve academic success, and also support those decision-making skills. So when it comes to responsibility, students are able to really think about why they're engaging in this, why they need to stay organized, why they need to attend specific classes. And they learn different leadership skills as they practice career exploration and try on these different career hats.
Yeah, and there are a couple misconceptions, I think, of career exploration that you address in the piece. The first one we sort of talked about, that career exploration is for older adolescents, largely when they're in high school or college or some other post-secondary learning experience. But the second is that career exploration is often commingled with vocational education, specific, career training that young people can opt into, again, mostly in high school and post-secondary years. This reframing that you do pushes back at both of those concepts. And I'd be interested to know from ASA standpoint why that reframing is really important so that people will really fully understand what it is that we mean by career exploration in middle school.
So even when you hear the word career exploration, many of us imagine what career readiness looked like when we were young, which is activities and questions that answer the question of what do I want to be when I grow up? Instead, career exploration is really exploratory. It's about trying out different careers, engaging in self-discovery, learning about what you like and also what you don't like, and trying out different things. What's different from career exploration compared to vocational learning is that instead of starting students on a specific pathway early on, career exploration actually really widens the possibilities for students.
Julie, why do schools have a role to play in career exploration? Some people might say, look, educators have a lot of responsibility in supporting the academic growth of students, and there are a lot of these accountability structures in place that put parameters around that. In the last, say, 5 to 7 years, we've layered on social emotional development more explicitly. Some might say, well, anything outside those maybe should be handled outside of school through after school or summer programs or through extracurriculars. Why in middle school should we be looking to embed career exploration into classrooms or more fully into the educational programming school-wide?
I think that's a great question. And honestly, it strengthens a child's education. It actually assists in the classroom. If a student knows their why, if they want to learn about something, if they're excited about the possibilities of the future, they're going to want to do better in their classes. They're going to want to learn. Oftentimes students, if you ask them why they're in middle school, they'll say, well, I'm just, I don't have to worry about this because it's not till high school that anything counts. But then what you see is as they get to high school, suddenly they realize they have a passion and now their time frame is really short. So by incorporating this in the middle school level, you're allowing students to kind of open up doors instead of to close them on themselves. And it really leads to self-efficacy and their self-identity, because it really comes down to we're not asking them to pick a career. We're asking them to reflect on their self, their skills and their passions and their talents, and then open doors to see where those could lead them in the future. And as a classroom teacher, I see that actually engages students more because you're bringing in authentic learning. You're talking to actual professionals from the community, or even with some of the software and the platforms we have now, it can be anyone in the world really that they can be talking to. And it engages them, and they can now start seeing and have a vision of themselves in the future instead of just saying, I'm getting through middle school to get to high school. They're kind of building their identity in middle school. So why not have them also look at those passions, skills, and talents and bring that into their identity as well?
It's also, isn't it, in the present moment when they're in middle school, it brings in sort of this relevance piece, right? Because there can be sometimes a disconnect of what they're doing in school and why is this important? What does this mean? And so bringing some of those sort of, I talked with some science teachers recently on this podcast that were doing a method called science discourse. And that relevance concept came up a lot to then get at some of the things that you were talking about, Ashley, with engagement. If they can sort of see why this is important, that's another utility, I guess, of career exploration.
Absolutely. I mean, it lends itself to having a rigorous, relevant, and engaged learning environment. It's authentic. You know, I did a project where we did a whole shark project, and I actually had students that did presentations, and we had one of our local organizations, the Atlantic White Shark Conservancy, actually got to take a look. So being able to present to the community gives students a sense of pride, but it also boosts their self-efficacy in science in this case. It's a cycle. The more confident you become, more you work at something, and it just leads to a stronger sense of yourself and what you can do. And that authentic learning through career exploration is key to that, I think.
I would also add it's empowering for middle schoolers because career exploration really gives them the opportunity to ask why and to challenge what's going on in the world right now. I think, if anything, now that we're going into a third year of the pandemic, career exploration has been shown to be even more important because students are able to see and understand like what's going on in the world right now as far as public health, the Great Resignation, virtual learning, and think, are there solutions to that? Or how would I have tackled that? How could I tackle that in the future? And it gives them ownership and empowers them to create change in the world.
Yeah, and I would just add that, Julie, that example of your shark project is so key because a solid academic experience, properly designed, is exploratory. It doesn't have to be career day where you get pulled out of the classroom. Really, exploration is integrated into those academic experiences so naturally, like you just demonstrated.
Absolutely. And I think that's really the foundation, is having it everywhere, having it within your classes, but also, having a career fair, having what we call career ambassadors, where we have high school students in our different pathways that come to our school and talk about the pathways to our students so that they understand the different opportunities open to them. It's really a mindset when you think about it. At first, it's definitely challenging. There's more work up front to try to get things going. But then once you kind of get in that mindset, it just becomes rote. It's not something that you really have to work that much harder for. Like anything else we do in teaching. Anytime, we're bringing something new into it, it's harder as you begin, but then you start seeing all the benefits and you realize that instead of me standing up in front of the classroom and just talking, these students, I'm just standing back and watching them learn because they're acting as if they are those professionals. And they're doing the research and they're excited and asking to stay after school, to come up at lunch. Can I come in early because I want to work on this? I'm getting goosebumps as I'm talking about it because a little of that work up front, it brings so much to the classroom. And it's just amazing to see your students in that sort of world.
Stephanie, what are you hearing in terms of the receptivity among the educators? Are you hearing that people think that this is something important, that they feel they have a role in taking on and can take on? Or is there any resistance, the kind of, gosh, not another thing sentiment? How's the initiative been received?
Yeah, I think there is some initiative fatigue just because of the space educators are in right now anyway, because of how much they're going through, how much they're just trying to get kids into the classroom. But when you frame it, like Julie and Ashley have talked about, as really just the whole curriculum should be exploratory. It's not one more thing. It's instead something that's really nicely integrated into the curriculum. Then I think the reception is more positive. So it's really just helping them see examples of how this just really nicely integrates that is helpful. And I think also, we were publishing this in the middle of the pandemic, and, some schools said, well, we had to forego career day because of this, but other schools said, actually, it greatly expanded career day because we had scientists coming in from California and other people coming in from, all over the world, and they were able to gain exposure to, usually they might have just invited some community members, but because they had to get creative, it actually created this much more expansive experience for their students. So we've seen some really exceptional creativity out of schools that have really driven effective career exploration programs for them during this time.
That was part one of my interview with Stephanie Simpson, Ashley Hemmy, and Julie DiPilato, authors of Career Exploration in the Middle Grades, a Playbook for Educators. In part two, we will talk more about what career exploration in the middle grades really looks like, how receptive teachers have been to incorporating it into their practice, and what AMLE and ASA are doing to get more educators to embed career exploration in schools. That's in just a moment on the Lessons in Adolescence podcast, where we feature conversations with researchers, practitioners, program developers, and advocates for young adolescents in the middle school years. Recently, I spoke with Darren Graves, Associate Professor of Education and Social Work at Simmons University and Adjunct Lecturer of Education at Harvard Graduate School of Education. Darren's work centers on racial identity development among youth. His most recent work is Schooling for Critical Consciousness, which shows, quote, how schools can help Black and Latinx youth resist the negative effects of racial injustice and challenge its root causes, a circumstance that has some particular relevance to Darren's research focus on Black boys.
I happen to do a lot of work in a particular K-8 school, and it was just so fascinating and also heartbreaking to see some of the Black boys move from maybe even, kindergarten all the way up until like the 6th and 7th grade. because they would start out as these cute, lovable little boys that everybody just adored. And then as they moved up, like the ways in which the adults around them like shifted their stance from these, lovable kids that, we wanted to help learn to like these bodies that we had to like control.
You can catch all of my conversation with Darren in a previous episode. And now, returning for part 2 of my conversation with Stephanie Simpson, Ashley Hemmy, and Julie DiPilato. Well, let's talk a little bit more about what this actually looks like in schools. Julie, tell us a little bit more about how this is actually done. You all showcase in a number of ways the elements of effective practice for career exploration in the playbook. You talk about it needing to be exploratory, which we've discussed here, student-centered, which gets into the identity pieces, and also I would say agency as well, sort of their sense of having ownership over their path and their future and their education. You've actually done this work in schools, in the school that you work at. So maybe just take us through what this actually looks like. Just paint us a picture of this, of sort of best-in-class career exploration as part of middle school programming.
So, like I said, it's kind of a mindset. We're not, we can have a couple career days a year, which is absolutely fabulous. And students are really engaged. And there's so many benefits to that. But having those on its own little island is really not enough. So it's bringing it into the classroom and really thinking about, what am I teaching right now? If I'm teaching about, sharks or the ecosystem, how can I bring something in from the world around us? So when I was thinking about my curriculum and knew I was going to be talking ecosystems and things like that, I looked local. And obviously, if people are familiar with the Cape, they're also familiar with sharks. And there's a big debate between sharks, seals and humans and how we're interacting and what do we do about that. And that's what we focused the whole unit on. And throughout it, we had students reaching out to professionals. They'd be like, can I email this person and ask them some questions? Sure. We had guest speakers come in. It was pre-pandemic, so we actually had people in the building. So it's kind of just flipping. Instead of thinking about like, what kind of hands-on activities can I do? You're thinking, what kind of activities can I do that integrate real-world solutions or integrate business people, community members, that gives that authentic moment for our students. It doesn't have to happen every day, but by making a connection to the different topics, the different standards that you're teaching, when you really sit and think about it, there's a lot of different ways you can do that.
I imagine for organizations like ASA and AMLE, this is sort of an important philosophy of approaching how you do this in schools. I mean, it used to be, I started out my career in education in sort of school reform, where basically a bunch of researchers found out how to do something right, and let's just plop it into every single school in the country. And we found out pretty quickly that doesn't really work. This is much more of a, what are the value adds? What are the things that we can do to enhance what teachers are already doing? As organizations that support schools, are you finding that the way you're approaching career exploration, does it lend to that type of approach?
Something we say frequently is that career exploration looks different in every school, but it's possible in every school. So, we want it to be tailored to the community. And that's part of the middle school concept in and of itself, is that it should be connected to what's going on locally for that school, what, those students' challenges are at home, or, their particular situation. So that's why we really intentionally collected a lot of case studies that came from a diverse range of schools, so that we could see how career exploration looks totally different in different schools, but it can be just as effective in helping those students gain exposure to those ideas and to start to build those 21st century skills.
We always share that career exploration is a community effort. We all ultimately benefit from career exploration because we're better preparing tomorrow's future leaders. So often when I'm talking to many of our school partners about building out a portfolio of professional connections, often if you send a letter or an email to somebody, a business within your community, or Stephanie mentioned like connecting virtually now, like if you're a school in Florida and you reach out to a startup in Silicon Valley, a lot of the time they'll say yes, because they're really hoping to grow that next generation of employees and leaders in this space. So it really is a community effort that we all benefit from. Another component to that is middle schoolers typically feel lonely. And that's also been exacerbated because of the pandemic. Relationship building and mentorships are crucial for career exploration. And helping students build out their networks and their own social capital really leads to finding future opportunities later on, connecting to be able to ask continuous questions, and then really being able to advocate for themselves as they enter high school and ultimately post-secondary programs.
Julie, you teach in STEM subjects. Is STEM a more natural place for career exploration at the middle school level to fit, more so than, say, language and literature or humanities or the arts? My wife is a sixth grade language arts teacher, for example. Is it as natural for her to embed aspects of career exploration as it is for you as a science teacher?
I think when I first started on this journey, to me, it felt more connected to STEM, but I think that's because I know STEM. I know my math and my science. I know the curriculum I'm teaching, and obviously I have an interest in it. So when I'm outside in the world, I'm seeing things happening around me. But I think one of the coolest things I've heard is our art teacher actually has brought in people like a sketch artist from the police department, so that students can see that art isn't just painting a painting or drawing something or doing anime, but there's other ways that you can. So maybe you have, a criminal justice interest, but you're also a great artist. You could be a sketch artist. Our music teachers have brought in composers. They actually had someone from Hollywood that zoomed in and talked to students about how they came to be and how they got to be doing these scores of these movies. And it's led to new courses that we've actually developed at our school. We actually have a dedicated career exploration course for those students that are really interested, and they can choose into that, elect into it in 7th grade. So it's really broadening the experience for our students. We see that our community really wants to be involved, and they're contacting, like, what can I do? And it's also bringing us together. It's not just the STEM that you can bring things in. If you think about all the different professionals in the world, you can tie every single subject at middle school into a profession.
Well, it's interesting. You actually touched upon something in that line that made me think of something else, which is a lot of people are thinking about how can we better support teachers. And this is actually one interesting way to do it, right? If you're in a profession and you can get connected and you can enhance a teacher's ability to engage students or to find different avenues for them to create more sort of experiential opportunities in your classroom, that's a great way to support teachers. That connection that I hadn't thought of until you just started saying that. We're sitting here, we're the converted, right? We sort of all bought in. Let's talk about how we get others to buy in. Stephanie, AMLE represents tens of thousands of middle-level educators across the country. You provide all kinds of resources and support to professionals dedicated specifically to this area. Tell us about the different pieces of this work. It includes, it's not just the playbook, right? There's more components to it. Tell us about what those are.
Yeah, and I think that plays nicely to what you were saying about buying in additional people. So we have the Playbook Challenge that is going on right now. So I think nothing communicates the effectiveness of this work like a good story. So we're looking for 3 schools who want to buy in, who want to expand or to create new career exploration programming, and we'll fund, small grants for those schools to start that work, and then we'll invite them to present on that work at our annual conference in November. So we're looking to expand the playbook by telling the stories of the schools that are doing this amazing work, because I think nothing communicates better to educators than other educators showing how impactful it can be in their school.
That's great. And there's a resource center online, right? Is that on the AMLE website?
Yeah, that's right. So we don't want to say, hey, this is important, now go off and figure out how to do it. So instead, we've developed a really robust resource center, and ASA has just been so instrumental in bringing their expertise to that piece. So in addition to the playbook, which is available free to download there, we have ASA's curriculum posted that can be easily integrated into your class. There are lots of resources, from helping you to budget to helping you to reach out for grants or to reach out to community members. Lots of templates available there. So we really wanted it to be a one-stop shop where if you said, hey, I'm inspired by this, it allows you to take that next step really easily and guided by, best practices.
And actually, part of ASA's mission and work is to propagate these ideas in the broader field of education, youth programs. And you do that through strategic partnerships, including AMLE. You have another one with Mentor. What are some of the most effective ways, in your view, to scale a concept of career exploration in middle grades, make it more widespread in terms of adoption?
So if we're talking at the district level or school level, building a community of practice is key to building sustainable and scalable programs, including educators, so both administrators, classroom teachers, counselors, parents. Parent engagement is huge and key to this, and something we haven't touched on too much yet. And community leaders in the planning and design process. And then sharing how career exploration is and should be a community effort. Additionally, lobby the school board and local politicians to devote funds to career exploration and workforce readiness. Apply for grants and seek out funding. In addition to our strategic partnerships, ASA also has a large advocacy focus. So at the state and national level, we support policies involving increasing education funds, training involving career exploration, access to internships and apprenticeships, and programs that really broaden student understanding of all post-secondary opportunities. And this really leads to greater, sustainable, impactful career exploration programs.
Let's talk about what comes next. Stephanie, in your position, you have a broad vantage point of the opportunities and challenges present for educators in the middle school space, and we talked about a little bit of those. I'd be curious to know, as you think about where middle level education is going generally, the kinds of things educators are facing amid this pandemic and what we know will be lasting effects of it, the kinds of things that have to happen in order for all middle schools to be places for young adolescents to develop in positive ways and to thrive. Where does career exploration fit into that big picture of this array of activity?
I think it's essential. And I think that, there are other factors that are impacting educators right now, like the educator shortage, even just keeping schools staffed right now. So leveraging some of those community partnerships that are exploratory by nature, I think are essential supports to help get us through this time, hopefully getting back to something closer to normal for schools. So yeah, I think that career exploration, it's going to be a very integral part of the middle school curriculum moving forward. And I think that those community partnerships are going to be essential in that, but also helping equip teachers in teacher prep programs to understand how to naturally integrate that in terms of preparing our next generation of educators to be natural, exploratory integrators into their lesson plans.
Yeah, that's a great point. I like that you brought up pre-service. I think it's really important to get that early knowledge and application of these concepts. Julie, what's the future look like for you in Barnstable? Where do you want to take this next? What more is there to do?
I've been very fortunate. We have an amazing career counselor at our high school, and our goal collectively together is to make a continuous 6 through 12 program where we're using common language, using a lot of the experiences. We're connecting our high school students with our intermediate school students, or bringing even recent graduates back to talk about where they are in life. I would love to see this expand even further, and honestly, even maybe bring it down. We have a 4th and 5th grade building. Start the experience there. It's taking those small steps and saying, okay, we're doing this now. How can we just add a little onto that? And reflecting on how things are going. What students do we have in front of us? And getting feedback from kids is huge.
Student choice is increasingly recognized to be so important in the middle grades. And I think sometimes we say, okay, you have A or B. Wonderful, we've given you choice, but that's really not a choice. It's two paths. So I think continuing to lean on our students to tell us how they want to explore is going to be really helpful in designing effective programs for them.
Absolutely. And each year, our programming looks different, because after students have had a chance to reflect on themselves and really talk about their skills, passions, and talents, and we've given them an opportunity to explore a little of that, that's how we build.
Ashley, 10 years from now, ASA is going to look back at this investment in career exploration in middle grades. What would a story of success look like? What would be satisfying to you all?
ASA is really focused on getting these learnings and these best practices in the hands of educators, politicians, government leaders, parents, community leaders, and also in the hands of students. So when you're thinking about students being empowered for that decision-making having them have access to this and be able to advocate for themselves and what best serves them. In addition to supporting our school grant partners, we support large-scale organizations who are scaling work across states. So you mentioned Mentor. We have Big Picture Learning and NIFTY who are doing some really amazing work, but then also expanding the research that we're doing and hopefully closing that gap between researchers and practitioners that sometimes tends to happen. And then also we are building out our digital strategy. We really want to build out direct to student resources as well. So students can access not only career exploration in traditional systems, but then be able to do it on their own and meet them where they are. So 10 years down the line, I think the more impact we can reach and the more students we can reach is a real sure sign of success for us.
Finally, for all three of you, if there was one bit of advice based on your advocacy and support for effective middle-level education and career exploration that you would offer to educators both in school as well as in after school and in summer programs of things they either ought to know or ought to be doing, what would it be?
I think if you're an educator and you're listening to this and you're like, where do I even begin? Where do I start with this? Especially right now where everyone's kind of short-staffed at the moment and you're kind of making it day by day. I'd recommend starting to look through the playbook, look at what the Resource Center has, and start small. Take a lesson that you're doing next week and think about how you can make a real-world connection or implement a new project and try that out. If you're an administrator, engage with a teacher or counselor in your building and try out a new event or add to an event that's already existing. Just starting with those small steps, you can then really go from there and expand that work.
We say this a lot at AMLE, but it can't be said enough that this work starts with building strong relationships with kids. Like the way Julie's talking about the work in her science classroom, I can tell she has strong relationships with her kids because they feel able to talk with her about what they're interested in. They feel the freedom to say, hey, I'd kind of like to explore this. They feel like she is a partner that respects them and values them. So it can't be said enough that really this work starts with educators building really strong relationships with those kids.
Well, thank you. Absolutely. I agree with both of you. Relationships are key in everything with your students, with your community, with your families, and that's how you make this work. I like what Ashley said, where start slow. Take that baby step. And right now, if schools are anything like what we're experiencing here on the Cape, we're trying to engage our students. And this is a great way to engage them. So, all of us as teachers are trying to rack our brain saying, how can I get my kids involved? How can I get them back into that interest of being in school? This is a great opportunity.
Well, Stephanie, Julie, Ashley, I really appreciate you showcasing the power and potential of career exploration in the middle grades, but also how you do the hard work in making it happen. So I hope it is successful. Thank you to you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was Stephanie Simpson, Ashley Hemmy, and Julie DiPilato. You can download Career Exploration in the Middle Grades, a playbook for educators, from the resources section of the AMLE website at amle.org. You can follow AMLE there or on Twitter at AMLE. You can also follow American Student Assistance, or ASA, on the web at asa.org or on Twitter at ASA. Thanks for joining the Lessons in Adolescence podcast, a production of Remaking Middle School, an initiative that seeks to transform the learning and development experience for young adolescents in the middle school years. Remaking Middle School brings together good educational practice in school and out of school with the latest developmental science. You can learn about Remaking Middle School or find more resources about the topics of this podcast on the web at remakingmiddleschool.org. Or learn more about the founding partner organizations, the University of Virginia's Youth-Nex Center on the web at education.virginia.edu/youth-nex, or on Twitter at youth_nex, and the Association for Middle Level Education on the web at amle.org or on Twitter at AMLE. The Lessons in Adolescence podcast is produced by Abby Gillespie and me, Jason Cascarino, editing by Paige Waterhouse. You can listen to or download each episode at the Remaking Middle School website, on Apple Podcasts, Google, Spotify, or wherever you find your podcasts. Thanks for listening.